All right, welcome. Today is the monthly gathering call. We are in June of 2023. And these gathering calls are really fun and interesting because they're really just something that I do out of my heart to be able to connect with parents who are raising an emotionally intense child. And when I do these calls, sometimes we have 100 people register and 40 people show up. And sometimes we have 12 people register because of the day and time. And one person
Sure.
shows up, which we have right now. So Corey, and then for people who will access the replay, because we are recording this and we'll send out the replay to folks. You know, the whole point of this call is to really just connect on what's happening in families. I'll ask you in a little bit if you feel like you want to share and talk to me and coach a little bit about what's happening in your family. And you can always pass as well. We can have a different higher level conversation too. But I like to talk about, you know, why do parents show up to a call like this? And I have a good sense of what's happening in families since I have a kid and have worked with like 1,000 families, teaching them some of the 8 tools that I've created in my Mad to Glad blueprint. But I started offering the call this year because I feel like when parents have a belief similar to mine that kids have gifts, it's just up to us to like figure out how to help them navigate the struggles in order to draw them out. It's a space that's really tender, and it's a space that, you know, sometimes in parenting, you get into parenting groups and it's a complaining fest, or you get into a group and it's like, well, just dig deeper and do your best and take big breaths, and the years are short and the days are long. And like the type A helper personality in me is like, but can we make it practical and can we relate on this topic? And can we find a way to really look at our kids' gifts and empower them, but also empower us as adults who want to, like, we're dedicated to our kids and we want to have boundaries and we want to have empathy and we want things to feel peaceful at home. So that's the point of this call. Yeah, to just gather and talk about what's happening. So if you're willing to share, I'd love to know why you're here.
Yeah, well, I think your email really resonated the day that it came through. I've had a very hard time. I have a 6-year-old. We had a very hard kindergarten year. He was the only child, and through the pandemic, I just feel like he didn't get enough exposure for kid interactions to prepare him social and emotionally for kindergarten. And we had a pretty traumatic kindergarten year that definitely took a toll on his mental health. And we started meeting with a psychologist. We found your program kind of midway through all of that. And it just really spoke to us about his reactivity style. He's not diagnosed with anything, you know, beyond, we could tell he was a little anxious about school, self-diagnosis, I guess. But kind of connecting with him and building those positive interactions. We feel like we've made progress getting through most of the Mad to Glad program. And now it's just a matter of, you know, finding the things that bring him joy and like motivate him to do what we want him to do and have appropriate behaviors. We still get some feedback, like at summer camp last week, the feedback was he, you know, if he doesn't want to do something, he is not super respectful to the adults, you know, will go off on his own, and he's a very independent thinker. So working through, you know, that's a gift in many ways. And I think it will serve him well as an adult and a teenager potentially. But right now it's really hard for the age 6. And his emotional side to that, I think he's easy to melt down because he knows a lot and he can think through a lot of things, and his perception of people's reactions to him is very insightful for 6, I think, but then he doesn't know how to respond to that. So I think, you know, finding his gifts, finding a way to harness in the response and the reactivity, just figuring out how to get enough of those positive connections to talk him down and de-escalate, I think. So I was just curious what other people's struggles have been and kind of helping work through that with school specifically.
Yeah. Well, and let's go into that conversation. We can do that shortly here because I can share from third party listening and some of the guiding that I've done, but also just to create value for the time that you're sharing with me here today. I'm curious, when did you start the Mad to Glad program?
When did what?
When did you sign up for Mad to Glad?
We signed up over winter break, and I think that we probably didn't start it until like mid to late January. And
Okay.
then in the midst, the school is recommending we see a psychologist and all of that too. So we were doing a combination of those things and definitely seeing improvements along with the change in classroom, getting a new scene. I think he was feeling so much like he was just constantly the bad kid, always in trouble, that he couldn't come out of that. So the change of scenery was a huge step in the positive. Like he even said at one point, that was my last chapter. I've left that. Like, I'm not going to go to the quiet room anymore. That was my last chapter in room 13. So he knows that's not how he wants to act, but I think he can't rein it in. So that's where that whole concept of, if the lid's blown, we can't talk sense into it in that moment. So through the Mad to Glad stuff, we've seen much shorter tantrums and fewer things that blow into a tantrum. So I know that like that really speaks to us as a parenting technique. And you can tell he feels like he's getting more of the positive interactions with us one-on-one. Devoting those 15-20 minute chunks of playtime and just really playing with him. He's very play motivated. So
good.
That's the hard thing too, is like he doesn't play in my play style. I would love to sit down and do a craft or cook with him or do an orderly game, and he just wants to imagine things and play pretend. So it's very difficult for me to have fun playing with him, which makes me feel as bad as a parent, but I know he needs that. And I've tried a lot harder, knowing that builds the positive to listen to me better.
Right.
I feel like we made amazing improvements in the home life. I think it's the stress of I can't control him at school and control, if he's perceived as being disrespectful. And he knows that's not acceptable, but like, what more can you do beyond just showing him at home that that's not how we treat people? So the school environment's the hard one.
Yeah, I hear that one. Some of the certified Mad to Glad mentor coaches who are in the Facebook group are principals, special ed directors, preschool educators, and I guess he's not in preschool, but kindergarten and first grade educators. Have you thought to ask any of those questions in that group? Are you in Facebook?
I haven't. I'll be honest. I got off Facebook a couple of years ago, so I don't go on it. But do you have access to those mentors in other ways, or is it strictly through Facebook?
It's through Facebook until we change our platform, but
okay.
But I get that. I know it's kind of I think that's great to be off of social media.
Double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm out of connection with a lot of things, but also it's not sucking up my time. I could sign on. My husband has an account, so I could sign on and try to get it that way. But
yeah, it'd be an interesting question to ask them, and I can certainly ask the question as well. It's just that if we record an answer, well, I could send it out by email, or we could send it on the Facebook group as well. And I'm not a school specialist, but I hear your question is, so you've worked on relationship at home and you're wondering how to help him develop those social emotional skills or those self-control, like speed up maturity so that he's doing well in school. Does that seem right?
I mean, that's almost where I ended. I'm like, is this just waiting it out till he's more mature to handle the situations? I felt like school this last year, they're sent out of the classroom so much for it that it was just basically telling him, that was a bad reaction, but not helping coach him through to an appropriate reaction sometimes. And I get that when they've got 30 kids, they can't always do that. So that's where I'm like, I can only do so much at home. And is it just waiting it out till he's more, mentally prepared to handle it on his own?
Right. And I don't want to ask for the name of the school since it's being recorded, but I do want to suggest that 2 school programs, and hearing some of the Mad to Glad mentor coaches in my head, 2 of the popular school programs that help teachers guide kids into these skills in the school environment are the Zones of Regulation and Move Mindfully. And both of them are
What
developed
was the
by,
second one? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
oh
the second.
yes, it's Move Mindfully. I'll show you the app. I'll even
Okay.
pull it up here. Have you heard of either of those?
The first one we have, and they actually taught those in class to the kids, and they had the school psychologist come in and talk through it. So I do think they were using those and definitely making an effort that way.
Yeah. Yeah, so the creator is Leah Kuiper. She's local to the Twin Cities here in Minnesota. And
Okay.
so it's been really fun to attend her trainings and talk to her about the program, because maybe one of the ways you could bridge the gap, knowing that you're not the teacher in the classroom, but one of the biggest thing about zones of regulation is, so we've got the red zone, we've got the yellow zone, we've got the green zone, and then we've got the blue zone. So green zone is like optimal functioning. You can pay attention and you can learn and you feel like you're in a content state in your body. Blue zone, I'd call, using my everyday language, kind of like more lethargy, kind of like tuned out, not feeling very motivated. As adults, we might consider ourselves in this zone if we're feeling depressed. And then if you move, so we got blue, we've got green, which is more optimal. Then we've got yellow zone, which is like things are starting to ramp up. I'm starting to feel, I tend towards anxiety. So I'm starting to feel kind of spinny or kind of overwhelmed. And then red zone would be something that's like you flipped your lid, or with the magic lad language for a kid, we'd say there's fire in the brain. You're losing your cool.
Sure.
So the cool thing about this model is you can bring it into the home environment. And by having that conversation there, it's going to begin bridging the gap between what he might be seeing on a wall at school. The success of the program really depends on the leader, the teacher, who's able to consistently talk about it. But
Sure.
to give your son some extra repetition, you can do role-playing experiences and talk through what is your green zone look and feel like. What are your hands doing? What is your body doing? What is your mouth doing when you're in the green zone? What happens in the yellow zone and what happens in the red zone? So it gives your son a way to start conceptualizing in a simple color format how he feels throughout the day. Now it's very cognitive when you're having a conversation like that. So I like to mix it and Move Mindfully. The creator, Kathy Flaminio, who first brought Yoga Calm into the Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools, created a whole program of Move Mindfully, where here's her app. It's like $10. It's got this little infinity sign at the top. So it'll say something like, well, if you're feeling really exhausted, let's say you need a routine because you're tired. So if you're in the blue zone, what helps you move through tired? And we'll say, oh, I need to wake up. And I have the preschool version on my phone since my kiddo's 3. But when you hit start, it will take you through a series of 3 poses, and they're designed to work in the classroom. So it could be something where you could practice with him, like, oh, you're getting sent out of the room because you're tapping your pencil and you're getting up out of your seat, like, or you're laying your head in your hands. You could practice doing some of these movements with him.
Okay.
And that really feels like above and beyond as a parent to do that at home. But if you're looking for something, that would be my parent
I feel like we've
angle.
done a lot more than that through the years, so that would be simple.
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah, and I feel like he loves role playing, like I said, just the imagination stuff and role playing scenarios. So that would be a good method to connect the colors at school to something he can physically do, or how to navigate that when he's feeling that way.
Yeah, and they, Leah and Kathy have taught a class together. It's worth looking at their websites to see if they have that offering for parents that could access it. Or you could, if you like a little more guidance, if you don't want to just do all that creating on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Thank you.
You're welcome. So with, I'm curious. So you had said he can't rein it in. So what does that look like? How does that show up?
Sorry, my phone's really low volume. You said about the can't rein it in.
Yeah, I'll turn my volume up in case that helps too. Yeah, what does he can't rein it in look like at home and at school?
Yeah, you can tell he's getting really angry, and anger is a big thing for him. I would say, like he doesn't, if he's not in the mood to do something, he does not want to do it. And he will physically start kind of clenching his fists and, bug his eyes out and make the facial expression of anger. And he's trying really hard to kind of hold that down. And I guess the lid blowing off is like that's just how I envision him feeling inside his head. And he has worked through that by stepping, to his own space. We try to get him to, if you can go to your room calmly, like the door can be open, breathe in your space, find, a stuffy that makes him feel safe and content. So those are the ways he's figured out to rein it in at home. But I think at school, there's just so much commotion and social pressure, and then a layer of embarrassment, I think, at school that's not at home. So it's hard for him to bounce back from a mistake or behavior that's not appropriate for the moment. And I think that's where too it's hard to overcome the school ones, because he has that added social pressure with kids, I think.
Yeah.
So he can't just step away out of the room on his own usually. But
yeah.
Also, I don't know that that's what we want.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of pattern interrupt. So if there's a big feeling happening, have you gone through any of my positive discipline modules yet?
It sounds familiar, but we said we need to pick it up and just start and go from the beginning again as just a refresher mode and finish up the end of it. Cause I think we made it through like number 6, I want to say, if that sounds right.
Okay. Yeah. Did you learn about right and left brain and big emotions and like labeling that to release some of that pressure rather than teaching in that moment? Like right versus left
that was
brain?
helpful because we were big on teaching in the moment and it was not working. So yes, that part of it. And the other thing I think we took away from one of the modules was like, maybe this is what you're talking about too, but we would have like 1-word phrases that were things that he could just like think twice was our big one. It's like when he was headed down the wrong path, instead of like trying to teach the moment, it's, think twice.
Nice.
And that gives him a pause. And I think too, saying pause instead of stop or no, he was very reactive to those words. And pause means, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen ever. It's, this is not appropriate here, or this is not safe here. Let's talk through another way to get what you need or want out of it. So those like single phrases or words were very helpful in like re-navigating the moment that was about to explode.
Yeah, really good. I really like that. And it sounds like you're aware of the importance of the words. So you've picked that up with some of the scripting that's been offered, that with his reactivity, like your words matter.
Yes, words matter. And it's interesting too, just when you have a child that's emotionally intense, like the no and the stop, that just would spiral him too, just to be like, oh, I did something bad, or, he has a hard time bouncing back from if he accidentally hurt me in playing. I'll even say, I'm not mad at, I raised my voice. And we noticed that really hit home too in one of your modules of, you're not yelling at them and you're not yelling, but they hear it as this yelling. And so sometimes less words are more in that aspect too. And just like having the redirection word and leaving it at that till he's in a calmer brain to talk through.
That's exactly right. Oh, and I'm just catching up on the video. It looked like there's a little delay. So with some of that anger, I'm thinking about the question that you kind of posed, which is what to do with anger, and do we want him to step out of the room or not from the classroom when there's anger? It is an interesting consideration because, again, it depends on the leader and the environment. So you've learned this as the parent with some of the modules to create the space for him to have the feelings and guide him in a helpful way of navigating those feelings. And so even in the school classroom, he's young enough where I would be really curious how his teacher navigates that as you move into the next school year. Do they have a mindfulness corner? Because mindfulness doesn't just mean you go there and you do your breathing and your oming and you're meditating quietly. Like the mindful spaces, how do I reset? Like reset is one of my favorite words when I'm talking to kids about anger.
That's actually our word too. Yep. So he when
Yeah.
he's had a really hard time, and he's ready to like calm down and come back to stuff, he'll ask for a reset. Like, can we have a reset? And I think in his mind too, that lets him start fresh from like the embarrassment layer, or where he feels like regret that that's how he acted in school. The reset, I think, really gives him a fresh start in that moment. And they did have a mindfulness corner, or like I think they call it like the quiet corner, where he could either like read a book or do a like hand puzzle thing to kind of just refocus. And so I think those were more effective than when he was sent out of the room to like a different room completely. He felt more of that banishment. I think that was in some of your modules, was, walking away from them or putting them in timeout by themselves for, away space, gave more of that banished feeling, like we were giving up on him and stuff. I think he got that from school initially. And the second classroom that we were in after the classroom changed, we said we really just need him to stay in the room. So if it's in this corner on this special chair and it's his quiet space, and that's where he goes. But like the sending him out of the room, I think, was what spiraled his self-esteem issue.
Yeah. Did you say
and so that was a big change.
Yeah. Did you say you requested that?
Yeah. So, and that was from your module. So that was a huge change to, I think, new teacher, fresh start from a social interaction
Emotional
space.
With
the kids then, and then also not being sent out of the room. Like that was how we made it through kindergarten.
I'm so proud of you for being an advocate for him.
Yeah, well, and it's weird, like you don't know that you need to do that until you have to do it. And so it was kind of a blessing in disguise that we found your stuff halfway through dealing with this. It's like, okay, that at least gives us something to ask for, to, change the way that we're trying to address it, because the first way didn't work. So
yeah. Well, and it kind of, when you have a child that has some challenging behaviors, or I think about this even from a health sense. I had some autoimmune stuff in the last decade or more of my life. And so I became open to possibilities of healing. So I saw healers who were like, oh, there was an energy healer who stood at my feet. And he's like, you have something going on in your mouth. I think you need to go to see a holistic dentist. And I had an infected root canal from 3 years prior that had no symptoms locally. And so the dentist was like, we need to take that tooth out. And with that, and then a type of neurological chiropractic to reset my immune system, my body started healing. And I had been a competitive rower, and I was able to get back to it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So experiences like that can shift our mindset. Like, can I be open to possibilities that I can be a leader in my life and in my life experience? In your story with your son and telling the teacher that reminds me of it, because you don't know to be an advocate until you realize that your kid's struggling, and you have the devotion to help them be empowered through the struggles instead of embarrassed or banished through them.
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder, because earlier you said, it keeps coming into my mind, you said something like, oh, well, the teacher couldn't really do something because I have 30 kids. I totally disagree. I mean, teachers are going to listen to this call and question me there, but there are many teachers who are very skilled at leading the classroom in the zones of regulation. They will take reset breaks after reset before they do math lesson. They'll go into this Move Mindfully app and play it on their smart board, and they'll do this little one around focus. And they'll take their kids through, oh, okay, I need to do something where I balance. So they'll have their kids, 8-year-olds, 14-year-olds, put their head in their hands on their desk for 40 seconds and do this sequence of 3 or 4 poses is all that each of these routines are. And then they come back into balance and reset. So I share that with you
from the whole classroom sense. And I will say his teachers were amazing and did above and beyond what I expected any teachers to have to do. I think it was just a hard year and a hard combination of kids, and it was just very startling, because I thought our son was going into it with a lot of success, and seeing kind of, I think ultimately maybe some anxiety around social scenarios and just integrating with kids in that way that he hadn't been expected to do before. And then the other aspect of that is when he doesn't want to do something that an adult's telling him to do, like he wants to just but no, it's time to sit down and do this assignment. His immediate fight back to that, and it's hard to integrate not punishment, but like what's the consequence when you don't do what we need you to do right now. So that's another thing that getting back into your program and finishing at the very end of it, I think hopefully will help us, but difficulty in figuring out consequence versus him perceiving it as punishment. Like we're almost scared to go down that path now because of the punishment sense of what happened at school really took a toll on his mental health, but he needs to have consequences. And so I think we've been figuring out more of, what's the positive rewards that you can work towards. So when you do this, as we ask, as it needs to happen, you can earn the positives. And we have a little more in our tool belt now that he likes to engage with. So
yeah,
it's hard though when all he wants to do is kind of be an independent player and make believe play. It was hard to find things that motivated him because he would prefer to just kind of play by himself sometimes.
So what do you find yourself joining him in where you're welcome into his space?
Yeah, I think we've done more like Lego play and Magnetile stuff because he can still envision. He likes to lead the story. So it's a lot of telling me what to say. And one of the things we picked up from the psychologist we work with was, is it fun for both? And that's kind of been a help too when he has play dates with friends, because previously, even when he was like 2 or 3, 4, if other kids didn't want to play what he wanted, he could care less. He would go do it by himself. And so helping him engage with other kids, but also practicing through when we play with him, this isn't fun for both right now when you're just telling me what to do. If I would love to play this with you, let me know when you're ready for me to come back, and let's make it fun for both. So kind of doing those interactive make-believe things, but not letting him lead as much, I think has helped him build some, strategies when that happens with other kids now. So playing with him for a good 15 to 20 minutes with like some of the building things is something we can do.
Yeah. But, and I'm chuckling because you said something about like, I would prefer to do things that are orderly for playing. Oh, did it come through or did it freeze?
The Lego rules, and he is totally going off on his own with the Legos, but we can do it at the same time and kind of do that together. So
yeah,
I think too, setting the timer has been a big help. Like, Weston, I'm going to sit down with you these 20 minutes together. When the timer goes off, I'll go make lunch. Then he knows that like the start and the end stuff. And that helps me to not get sidetracked and try to multitask. I think that's what I was doing a bad job with before, is I thought I was playing with him constantly, but then realizing that no, I'm multitasking while I'm playing, so he never feels that like straight one-on-one attention. So that really improved our relationship.
Yeah, really nice. I want to see if I can find a visual here to share with you, because as you're talking, it keeps coming to my head. So when you're talking about some of the anger that he's expressing and experiencing, and you said like that social skill at school, it makes me think of these books by Julia Cook. Have you heard about any of her books?
No.
I'm a big fan, since I have an autism background and would talk to kids about social skills and having big feelings and big meltdowns. We're not talking about autism at all in our conversation, but I'm exposed to a lot of these things. Julia Cook has amazing books, especially for your son's age. Like there's one book called My Mouth is a Volcano. So it talks about how things get really fiery, or kids who blame other people and they don't take responsibility, but it's not my fault.
Oh, that's a big thing of his. We're working through that.
Yep. Or this one, that rule doesn't apply to me. These could be some really nice books. And I really heard a lot about this book, Wilma Jean, The Worry Machine. So that might be worth checking out from the library, or even purchasing when he can read stories, since he's imaginative. that's one of the ways you can grow social skills without having to lecture him from a parenting perspective. Oops, I might have lost you there. Something happened with your signal. So I can see if this comes back. Oh, I heard something. I heard a little bit anyway. So as we're waiting to see if this connects through here, I'll also pull up something else visually for friends who are listening to the replay right now. So we're talking about, oh, here you are.
That's awesome.
You're back, Corey.
We'll definitely seek those out.
Yeah, good. And I don't mean to cut you off, but it sounds like you really cut out there. So I'm going to do another screen share until maybe your video.
I can't see your video.
I know it's cutting in and out. I'm going to mute you for a minute, Corey, just because it's cutting out pretty badly. So the other thing for you, if you listen to the replay and then other folks who are catching this, is that when, so Corey's asking this question about how to motivate her son and help him be a listener at school. And when I think about how much influence we have over children, I think about how when they're at home, if we can develop a relationship that I call the I listen to you and you listen to me relationship, that's how kids can develop this skill of following the group plan, of listening to the teacher at school. And so the way that we do that, the helping kids keep their cool and listen to somebody who's an authority figure, is by moving up this self-regulation pathway or flow chart, I call it. These are the skills that if you practice these at home, they'll help carry over into your kids' school setting. So in general, just to give you a sense of what this is. Oops, it's getting kind of funny again. Let's see if I can unmute you. Is it working? Oh, I think you fell off now. So the way that this works is if we see that we're in the cycle where our kid's stressed out, and I always have a picture of a fire in the brain when we're talking about kids who are having challenging or externalized behaviors. I was talking to a mental health professional today and they use that term like, oh, you're talking about externalized behaviors. Oh, okay. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. What we do as parents is like, okay, asking questions like, Corey, what do we do to make this better? How do I equip my kid? How do I help them be motivated and independent in this situation? And if we're using a skill that's not the right match for what our kid's brain needs, then we're going to be confused. Like, how come it works this time, but not that time? And then we get more fire and there's like the stress confusion cycle. So really what we can do to help kids develop a listening relationship with us at home is we start with our own skills of practicing calm. And this really is rooted in brain science. I'm not going to geek out on it now because I don't know if you care about that, but when we can practice this approach where we're practicing calm, then when your kid becomes enraged, it helps them to relax again. And every time they become enraged and then relax, the neural pathway forms of, I know how to recover. I know how to go full circle. When I escalate, I can come down again. And when you practice and model that as a parent, when you practice and model that calm, even though you're feeling triggered and enraged sometimes, that's setting the foundation on a neurological level for your child to have the pathway to develop that skill with more and more practice. Then we move into this realm, like Corey was talking about certain types of play with your kid. I know that's module 3 in the Mad to Glad blueprint. And the way that you play can strengthen children's self-esteem and help the relationship part of their brain feel really seen and heard. So if you have a kid who's more stubborn or strong-willed or bossy, if they get to be that way in play and we don't correct them, we don't say things like, no, let's do it like this. Oh, let's do this, but let's not make too much of a mess. If you can follow their lead and learn some of those play principles, their emotional and relationship part of the brain feels really seen, heard, important, respected, valued. So that when you say, now it's time to go do this, they're able to connect to you better because you filled that relational part in their brain first. And so it becomes more mutual back and forth, listening and connecting. When we're talking about Corey's son at school, the same thing is true when children thrive in classrooms. It's often because the adult in the room, the guide in the room, the leader is setting this example, and they're meeting these psychological needs that children and really all humans have. Then we move into this next realm as we're walking our way up the brain. We've learned some skills to calm. We've learned some ways to connect so that kids feel really deeply valued, and allows them to reciprocate that listening, connection, and value to you. Then we move into the skills of collaboration. So Corey, if you're watching this after the fact, if you're catching the replay, what I was going to do is I was going to direct you to your membership area, since you purchased the Magic Glide Blueprint, into the positive discipline section. Because kids who have a few reinforced rules at home with a positive discipline system become really good listeners at school, because they learn, they don't turn. If you have too many rules, your kids are going to tune you out because there's just too many. And we start mixing rules with things like chores. So we put in the same basket, we'll say something like, there's no swearing and you need to make your bed in the morning. Like, those really don't have equal weight. So when at home, you can focus on your top 4 behavior rules, like if when he gets angry, there's no yelling. She was saying she takes him into his room when there's yelling, so he's in a safer space and can do his breaths. There's no hurting. Same, like when you have rules like that, and the positive discipline system that helps them reset without banishing them or sending them away, you're helping take them through this ability to reset. And that carries over into school. So he's a younger kiddo at 6 years old. So to continue advancing and developing his social skills, since he missed some social interactions during the pandemic and then went into school, this is one of the ways you do it. How they interact with you translates then to how they interact with teachers and with peers. So I wanted to say that. And when you, as a parent, practice calm, connection, and collaboration, that makes those gears turn in the brain to self-regulate for children. So one other share that I would love to do right now, just to be really helpful, is to look here and show Corey that when you hop into the membership area and you see all these 8 pillars, positive discipline, like setting rules, is under red light parenting. So you can get the education on what exactly this is and the action steps. And then you can go right over here on how exactly do I do positive discipline. And this will set your kid up. If you practice that this summer, this will set your child up so that when the next school year starts, he'll be able to take more direction, be more independent at managing some of his big feelings, because he'll understand the boundary. Like, there are certain things that I can't get away with, or said another way, there are certain things that when requested, I'm required to do them. Like, I have to do them. So I hope that was helpful. And I know that quite a few of you registered and then emailed to say that you're going to listen to the replay. I do want to speak to a couple of the question forms that were submitted to make sure that I can speak to those a little bit here. One of you was saying that you have a teenager and you're working on connection strategies because your teenager is playing video games and you're feeling like you want them to have a little bit more variety in their life. So let me see if I can pull that up real quickly here. Okay, I've got it here. So we're talking about a couple that has a 14-year-old with ASD and ADHD diagnosis, and you're wanting to reduce some stress at home. So I know you couldn't join live today, but I'll put a few ideas onto this call here. So this monthly gathering where we talk about kids who have emotional intensity, what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to open up the door of possibilities so that you have some ideas on how you can make things better. And so when you described that you're looking for tips to support your son and keep him active happy and thriving. Well, first of all, that sounds just like you, Mom, from the emails that I've seen. I love that those are some of your family and your life values. But you're saying that he wants to stay in the house because he has anxiety and he wants to either watch TV or be gaming. And that when you limit the time and you cut him off, he explodes. He doesn't have friends in the neighborhood, and working on social skills is really important. And it looks like he's signed up for summer school, so that's going to help get him out and get active. So whenever it comes to screens, I'm gonna speak to the screen aspect, and I'm gonna speak to the relationship aspect right now. So from the screen aspect, I'm a really big fan of screen plans because it creates something concrete that your child can follow and that you can follow as well. I follow Erin Walsh with the Spark and Stitch Institute. I think she has some really good information about screen time, not saying it's black and white, it's good or bad, but that it's something for us as parents and caregivers to be curious about, like, what does our child like about screens and how can we fill that need in other ways? I've also done some research through or learned from Dr. Victoria Dunkley, who has a really good book called Reset Your Child's Brain. And she'll talk about isolation behaviors, anxiety, depression, and mood disorders, and how doing something like a screen fast for 3 weeks can help the brain heal from some of that addictive quality that can, in the addictive nature of screens, if you've heard that. One of the things that was studied about Facebook a long time years ago was that even seeing that little notification symbol pop up on your phone gave a hit of dopamine. And so when games are designed, they're designed with that same concept in mind from a neurochemical perspective. When you win the next level, you get a hit of dopamine. So you feel good about yourself. Oh, this many people from a Facebook perspective commented on my post. Oh, I got to this level. Oh, I have this many stars or dollars or lives. And they're designed to engage and keep you locked in, like they keep you connected to the game or that you're playing or the show that you're watching. The same thing is true looking at some of the research on screens. If we move out of the gaming world and we enter into the world of cartoons. I have an almost 3-year-old at home. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics has a statement that says they recommend 0 screen time for kids under the age of 2. 0, right? Like, shocking to think 0 recommendations for we have a family WhatsApp thread, and we'll send videos because I have 4 siblings and each of them have a kid or 2. So we'll send videos of what's happening in our family to all stay in touch and show our kids the videos of the cousins so that when they get together, they're feeling a little bit more in touch as well. But some of the reasoning for that when it came out was because of brain health. So what you're talking about is real, that your child, your teenager who has some anxiety, what happens when kids are on screens a lot is that they, especially from an autism perspective, if they're lacking some social skills, then the screen time on its own isn't necessarily like the evil thing, but it doesn't give opportunity to develop social skills. And what we do out of love and care for our kids, some of us, if we fall into that role of like, oh, let me just not make them too anxious, is we accidentally, without knowing, feed into that avoidance strategy. So how do we push their boundary a little bit to grow their skills without pushing them into complete meltdown where they can't recover, but also not going the other way where we don't have that expectation on them, because then they develop a habit around going to the thing that they're good at and they're feeling rewarded by on that neurological dopamine level, but not feeling rewarded on that relational thrive in my life level. So I don't have all the answers. But I wanted to mention that I'm a big fan of screen plans. And so if that is something that is appealing to you, I have a free blog that talks about screens and setting up a screen plan based on the research and based on what I also know about family dynamics, like how do we have boundaries and enforce them in a way where we feel like we're guiding our child through some of their struggles so that they can grow without just going cold turkey and completely removing it if that's not right for our family. So on my website, samanthamo.com, I went to the blog page /blog, and I went to number 6 at the bottom here at the time of this recording. And I have a blog called My Child Feels Entitled to Video Games. So this is what I would suggest, is going through and reading this on how to create a screen plan. I have like the five bullet points to put on your screen plan. And there's a little video there that talks about the best tips so that kids can turn it off without a fight. So that's what I would share about screens. And let me just look one more time at your question. So how to keep him active, happy, and thriving. That would be part of the protocol, is having a plan on screens and knowing how to respond as a parent if there are meltdowns when you start enforcing a plan and having a boundary like that. Which, if you ever want to have a conversation, anybody, just email hello@samanthamo.com and we can set up a free 30-minute consultation to see if some more support would be valuable to you. The other thing about anxiety that I wanted to mention, because I showed you that visual around calm, connect, and collaborate, in order to get kids actively participating in their lives and having a sense of purpose. When kids have anxiety or anger, I feel like I see the 3 A's here: anxiety, anger, and acting out. It's making sure, like I think back to when I had social anxiety as a teenager, I would black out before I even got to high school. So I'd be making toast in the morning and pouring a glass of milk, and the room would narrow and darken, and I could still hear my dad listening to the KQ 92 morning show in the living room right next to the kitchen. But I couldn't, like, the lights just turned off in my world. So I would lay down on the kitchen floor, and then I didn't know how much time would pass. But then, like, I'd hear my dad chuckling at the radio at Tom Bernard, and then like the lights would come on again in my brain, and I could stand up and put some peanut butter on my toast that was now cold. So, some amount of time had passed, and move on about my day. When I realized I was blacking out in high school, I was in my 30s. That's when I first realized it. I was like, oh. And I talked to my dad. I said, why didn't you ever say anything about me blacking out? And he's like, oh, I didn't know. Like, well, remember when I would lay on the floor in the kitchen? He's like, oh, I thought you were just tired, because he raised my 3 older siblings ahead of me. So he's like, I'm used to teenagers being tired. I thought it was just an early school day, so you're catching an extra few minutes of rest. So why do I share that example? Well, it goes to one of the things I said at the beginning of this call, which is I'm a firm believer that all kids have gifts, and it's up to us to help them navigate through their struggles so we can draw those gifts out. When you have a child with anxiety and what's it called? A preference for something like screens instead of social skills, one of the things that you can do that's a brain-based and relationship strategy is you can practice commenting on the emotions that you notice he's feeling. So maybe you would take that out of the context of screens, like maybe not like, let's talk about how you explode when I turn the games off. I'm sure you've already had that conversation 100 times. And I can, like I said, I can provide some more coaching support around that if you wanted to set up a call, but it's noticing, I can tell you're worried about this. It seems like this feels hard for you. Okay, yep. I think when we were talking about going out and about and not having your screen with you, when whether he has fidgets or sensory things or stumps his feet or huffing and sighing like lots of teenagers do, you can say something like, I think when you were sighing and rolling your eyes at me, that maybe what you were trying to tell me is that you're feeling nervous about this, that you're uncomfortable with this. That kind of language where you acknowledge kids' emotions and you see beneath the behavior. It's not the resistance. It's not the checking out. It's not the defiance or like teenage moodiness, but it's like, what's the feeling? Oh, it's worry. It's frustrated. It's overwhelm. And when you get really good at these types of empathy conversations, then you're going beneath the behavior and really helping your child feel bonded to you because you see them. Like when I'm going to be packing for leaving for 4th of July tonight after a long day. If I'm confused, like, okay, what are all the things that I need to bring? My husband knows, instead of being like, it's simple, just do this. Here's the 10 things to put in the bag. He knows to pause, because I've coached him through this, and just say, honey, I can see that you're worried. I am worried. Like, I'm having a hard time sorting through all of it. And that just gives you that breath of feeling seen and feeling heard. So we can do the same thing for our kids, and that goes a long way towards happy and thriving for now and the future of your kids' mental health. So I hope that was valuable. Join me on a future one of these calls. These monthly gathering calls are free when we're talking about how to make it better. And if you want more support, let me just share with you on a different part of my website here so that you see it. I love connecting with parents to see if there are some things that they can do to really make things better at home. So on my parents page, what you'll see when you scroll down, of course, I have my Mad to Glad Blueprint program, which you're welcome to guide yourself through. It's self-paced, but you could also set up a call with me here. It's a complimentary 30-minute call, and we can talk about what's happening in your family and if more resources are needed, whether that's coaching or a group program, to be in community with other people as we're navigating this. And there are people who are like-minded and devoted and care about their kids, but you might have a kid that some of the traditional tools aren't working, and your worries are growing, and you have goals for a positive future for your relationship with them and for their lives. So thank you for joining me on this call or catching the replay. You can also easily email me, hello@samanthamo.com, and I'm happy to connect with you. Thanks for sharing your time. Have a lovely day. And if you want to sign up for any of these future calls to join other parents who may or may not have been through Mad to Glad Blueprint, it was also on that page right there. It looks like here's the upcoming call dates that you can select to join us live, or if you sign up, you get the replay. Maybe you like to hear this topic over and over again. All right, take really good care.